Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011. The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Yarmuth, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great honor to be here on the floor of the House of Representatives talking to the American people about one of the most critical things that this body does, and that's to decide how much money we ask our citizens to contribute to the government and how that money is going to be spent. And you know, I didn't come here intending to respond to the gentleman who spoke before me, but he cast, in one respect, the whole debate over our budget very well when we had Mr. Brown's four-way test. And the first thing that Mr. Brown put on there is it right and moral? And I agree with him, because when we debate the budget of the United States, when we debate how we're going to spend the taxpayers' money, the first question we should ask is it right and is it moral? And the converse is, if we don't spend something, is it wrong and is it immoral? Today, I had the great honor of visiting Walter Reed Hospital. And there, I got to speak with several of our extremely brave, courageous soldiers who have been injured in battle. And one young man who lost both legs, one just above the knee, one all the way to his pelvis, and lost a little bit of a finger on one hand, was on what can only be described as bionic legs, which he said are extremely good. The technology is extremely advanced, but they still don't help him walk. And he talked to us for a long time about what he had been through, the progress he had made, and what he hoped to achieve with technology. And his parting comment to us was, you know, this is the result of the federal government spending money on medical research. This is helping people not just in the military, not just in the armed forces, but also in the private arena as well. And I look at what the Republican budget that we will consider later in the week has done, and it slashes money for medical research. And I say, let's apply Mr. Brown's four-way test. Is it right? Is it moral? Also, does it make any sense to cut medical research when we have brave men and women who are reacquiring some of their lives after making incredible sacrifices because of the money that we have spent, the taxpayer money we have spent funding critical research? It would be immoral to deny, Don was his name, to deny Don his request that we continue to fund medical research that's going to help him regain his capabilities, his physical function, and the thousands of young men and women who have sacrificed so much for us. So, as we enter this debate this week on the Republican budget proposal, the Democratic alternative budget proposal, we have choices to make. That's always what government is about. It's about choosing. How do we spend the taxpayer money that we asked our taxpayers to contribute to the general welfare of this country? Last week, we sat in the Budget Committee and considered the Republican budget. And I'm sure that my characterization of the Republican budget will be different than the Republicans' characterization of their budget. But I will say one thing, that we all agree that we have a fiscal challenge in front of us. We have enormous deficits. We can argue about how we got here. I'm not going to spend time debating that tonight. But we clearly have a challenge, and the future is even more challenging. So the question is, as we approach this budget deficit, this future of deficits, a very, very large national debt, What's the best way to approach it? Now, the Republican answer is that there is only one side of the ledger. Now, most homes, most businesses have two sides to the ledger. They have an income side and they have an expenditure side. As far as the Republicans on the Budget Committee are concerned, we only have an expenditure side. You've heard the Speaker of the House say, we only have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem. You've heard my senior senator from Kentucky, the minority leader of the Senate, say, we don't have a taxing problem, a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. Well, in fact, if you look at our situation right now, we're no different in a lot of respects than the average household or the average business. If we have a challenge, a financial challenge, we do a couple things. We say, okay, where can we cut costs? And then we say, how can we generate more revenue? Those are the two options. As far as the Republicans are concerned, there's only one option. It's cut expenditures. And unfortunately, my characterization, they cut it on the programs which help the most vulnerable people in our country. On the other hand, what did they do on the revenue side? They say, well, let's see, millionaires and billionaires haven't done quite well enough over the last decade or so. You know, 20 years ago, they only earned 9% of all income in the country. Now they earn 35% of all income in the country. That's not quite good enough. Let's give them another tax break. The Bush tax cuts were okay, but they weren't quite large enough. So instead of cutting their rate from 39.6 to 35%, let's cut their maximum rate to 25%. And let's see what that does for the economy. Well, I think most of my Democratic colleagues would agree that if we're going to approach this deficit and the national debt in a responsible way, we will look on both sides of the ledger. We will ask people who have done extremely well, who have the capacity to give more, to pay a little more, and we will make responsible cuts that are balanced across the sector. But there are so many ramifications to this debate, and we're going to be debating it all week. And I'm proud to have with me today to help me discuss this some members of the Budget Committee from the Democratic side. It's my great honor now to yield to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tom.